Ministers have cleared the way for Britain to become the first country to allow an IVF technique which would lead to the birth of babies with 3 biological parents. The government is preparing draft regulation to permit the procedure, which is designed to help couples who are at risk of passing on a severely disability. Opponents say the technique is unethical and a warning of a slippery slope. Our medical correspondent Fergus Walsh has the details.
This lab in Newcastle is set to make medical history. The scientists are developing an IVF technique which will enable couples affected by mitochondrial disease, which can be fatal, to have a healthy child. The parent's genetic material would be removed from a fertilized egg, leaving behind the faulty mitochondria. It's then transferred to a donor embryo, stripped of its nucleus but containing its own healthy mitochondria. The resulting embryo has the parent's genes plus a tiny bit of DNA from a second woman, which would be passed on to future generations.
This is not about tampering with who we are. The genes from our mother and father that make us what we look like, how we behave, are in the nucleus. The only genes in the mitochondria, which incidentally has no paternal linkage at all, are the genes to provide energy for that cell to function.
The change will come too late to help Sharon Bernardi. She had 6 babies who all died within days of birth. The 7th child, Edward, survived, seriously disabled, dying aged 21.
You live with that pain every day. You don't ever get over it, and this would have made a huge difference to me.
A public consultation showed broad support for the technique, but critics say it's unethical and a slippery slope towards designer babies. This won't require a change in the law, but Parliament will be given a free vote on the issue. Severe mitochondrial disease is rare, and so around 5 to 10 couples a year may benefit. The first could be treated within 2 years. Fergus Walsh, BBC News.
Well, let's talk about this a little more with Josephine Quintavelle from the group Comment on Reproductive Ethics, or CORE. And thank you so much for coming in. What do you think?
We're quite horrified. We were expecting this, but it's a shameful moment for the United Kingdom.
Explain why.
Because the process is experimental. There's no idea there's no certainty at all that this will work. So you'd be using children in a very experimental way, hoping that it would work. It doesn't cure the disease. It's a convoluted way to try and avoid somebody being born with it. That's what the process is. But what you're doing is you're changing, in the simplest of terms, the building blocks of life. We've all got 2 parents. Suddenly these embryos would have 3.
But the experts make the point is that it is a tiny change. In your view, does that make no difference?
No, it makes no difference at all. If you go over an ethical slope, it doesn't matter how far down you go, you've crossed that border. I think this is the first time I've ever had to speak on an IVF issue where I've got most of the world behind me. There's absolute outrage from the United States, from across Europe. I was in Brussels last week and we were imagining that this was going to happen, and so they were warned about it, and they're absolutely aghast. There are so many international conventions against it.
But you saw there in our piece what the aim is. You said there is no proof it will actually work, but that is the case with any medical advancement, isn't it? I mean, you have to take these first stages before you actually get there. You saw what it is designed to try to help. Is it not worth trying to combat that?
Well, the issue here is that we have no idea whether this will work. There is absolutely no way that you could imagine it would, and in fact the Chief Medical Officer in her press release said that too. It might save the lives of 10 babies. So this is the issue. Do you do something that's potentially very risky, very dangerous, on the off chance that it might produce a good result? And something that the public has to understand is that when you've manipulated an embryo at that stage, you've changed its genetics, and you would need to follow that child until it reproduced as well to see what it was going to pass on to subsequent generations.
Do you not accept the truth, though, which is that perhaps around the time of IVF and other advancements, there was similar voices of concern, similar voices of outrage, but actually those fears haven't translated. It's become a normal part of medical practice now. Could this not follow the same path?
Well, originally IVF was an attempt to mimic nature. It wasn't trying to distort nature, so it was using sperm and an egg and trying to...
But you will know the resistance that there was.
I certainly do know.
And you know the point I'm asking you, which is whether that actually ever becomes a reality, those sorts of fears that you just listed, or whether actually the advancements just become part of what we've become acceptable.
I think people have to understand we're crossing the Rubicon here. This is something completely different. This is not an attempt to mimic nature. This is an attempt to distort nature, and for the first time I find myself in alliance with a lot of secular geneticists, significant players around the world. The United States of America, for example, there have been some very, very worried press releases coming out from Council for Responsible Genetics and other groups. But across Europe, as I say, there are 40 countries across Europe that would see this prohibited. We can't all be wrong, and the concern is it's not just another version of IVF, it is actually changing what it is to be human and moving to this concept of 3-parent embryos.
Okay, Josephine Quintavelle, thanks for coming in to talk to us.